Did you know that you can use Pinterest to grow your podcast and get more listeners and followers and all the amazing things that come with growing your podcast? Yes, I'm so excited to talk to you about Pinterest for your podcast today. So let's get right to it. Hey y'all, Krystal here today, and I'm excited to talk to you about Pinterest for your podcast. I actually did an entire podcast episode about this a long time ago, and I feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to revisit this because I want to incorporate Pinterest more into my growth and marketing strategy. So I thought, when I'm giving myself a refresher, why don't I teach these principles to you too? So make sure you check out this podcast episode right here. I'm going to link it in the description below so you can check out exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to Pinterest for your podcast. But let's get right to it. Let's talk about how you can use Pinterest for your podcast. So first things first, if you are brand new to Pinterest and maybe you've been a Pinterest consumer for a long time, which I have. I've been on Pinterest for years and years now, but I didn't understand how exactly I could use Pinterest for my business or for my podcast, using it for my content. So the question that most new people to Pinterest have, what do I actually pin? Like, what do you actually put on Pinterest? How does Pinterest even work when I'm using it for my podcast? So the first thing is I'm going to tell you why I think it's so important that you have a website for your podcast, because granted, you can pin your podcast and send people to like a ready-made website. You're going to have better results whenever you can use your own podcast website. I actually did a video right here that you can go check out that's all about how to create a simple website for your podcast in a few different ways. So make sure you go check out this video. It'll be very helpful in helping you decide which website strategy works best for you and your podcast. But in order for this to work and get the maximum results with Pinterest, you're going to need your own website. Like, there's no beating around the bush when it comes down to it, because at the end of the day, you're going to control the way the URLs look and how you want everything to be formatted on your page. So that's basically like step number one is, what do you put on Pinterest and where does it go? All the things. I'm going to recommend that you have a website where all of your podcast content lives. So how does Pinterest actually work with your podcast? So first of all, you have to have an image or a video and a URL that can all be tied to. So if you're familiar with Pinterest and what it looks like, you can see here that you can scroll through and see all these images. They're beautifully created and crafted, and there are lots of templates on Canva that you can go check out to see what the exact dimensions are for pins and all those things. But today, I just want to talk about how you need to create an image graphic, same thing, and have a URL for your podcast episodes or your podcast content, whatever that looks like for you. You could just have one URL that you link to, but you could create multiple images for each episode, or there's a lot of different ways that you can approach Pinterest. But what I'm going to recommend you do is you create an image for each of your podcast episodes, and then you tag those on Pinterest with your image to that particular URL that goes for your podcast episodes. I'm going to show you an example here. So let's hop on over to Pinterest and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so here we are on Pinterest, and there are probably lots of other amazing tutorials out there to show you how Pinterest works, all the ins and outs, but I just want to show you how you can create a simple pin for a podcast episode. So this is on my profile, but what I need to do first is actually create a pin. So I'm going to take you to Canva. I've talked about Canva before. It's one of my favorite resources I use all the time. And you can actually just go directly into Canva and type up Pinterest pin. Click on that, and then they have these incredible templates already set up. So you can literally, like, hundreds of all kinds of templates set up already. They have lots of stock photos that you can choose from, and you can grab whatever works for you, your podcast, your brand, however that's going to fit with what you are trying to accomplish. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to pick a really simple one. Now, I'm going to create a simple pin that is related to a recent podcast episode, which is all about foundation podcast episodes. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to put foundation. I'll make this a little bit smaller. Just enough to where it all fits. So let's change the font size. There we go. Foundation podcast episodes. Delete all this. I'm going to say what they are and how to create them. I'll make it kind of more spaced out. Now I can change the background image here. So just for the purposes of this, I want something very simple and easy to read. So we'll just go with this background. Sure, it looks fantastic. And because this is an image, I'm going to take that off and I'm going to delete this. Actually, that one doesn't look all that great. Okay, there we go. I'm going to make this darker, change the color to match my brand. We'll change that and we'll change this font color. I'm just doing this for the purposes of, very simple, but you do not have to be complicated when it comes to creating pins for Pinterest and for your podcast. Just do what works best for you. I'm going to make this a little bit tighter. Okay, so I know that there are obviously tons of other templates out there that you can go, because I probably wouldn't even click on this. But for the purposes of just like getting something out there and creating something, foundation podcast episodes pin. Okay, so it's done. I'm going to download it. This is going to be a PNG. And what's cool is this is already the size that you need it to be for Pinterest. So it's getting ready. Okay, now it's downloading. So what I would need to do is go to Pinterest and add this image and actually create a pinnable image on here. But how do you do that? You need the URL. So this is the actual where the episode lives on my website. So you can see, you can play the episode here, and here's all the show notes related to what this episode is about. But I need this URL in order to tie this image and everything together on Pinterest. So I'm going to copy this. I just did a Control-C, so I have that ready. And I'm going to go up here and I'm going to create a pin. So create pin. And what I'll need to do is, there we go. So I'm going to put foundation podcast episodes. This is just very simple because I want it to be something, it's just for the purposes of this training. This episode is all about creating foundation podcast. Oops, if I can spell. Okay, I'm really just putting something in here so we have it. And then here's where the link is going to go. So we have it there, and then I can publish this at a later date, or I can publish it immediately. I'm just going to choose to publish it. I'll probably delete it right after this. But that's where I can choose where I want it to go. So these are all of my boards that I have on here, but I'm going to choose, let's do how to start a podcast, because that's really where this content would be relevant to. And then it's published. It is out on Pinterest. It is ready to go. So I could continue to do this for all of my podcast episodes, and I can actually pin multiple images. I could do video on Pinterest. There are so many cool things that you can do, but this is just a quick way to get started with using Pinterest for your podcast. So I want you to tell me in the comments below, do you think Pinterest is going to be a great tool for you to use to reach more listeners organically? Do you think that this is something that's going to align well with your audience? Tell me in the comments below, because I'm curious if you think that this could work for you. Okay, let's get back to the video. Well, I hope that you found this Pinterest for your podcast video super helpful. If you did, I would appreciate you giving this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe below because we put out brand new podcast videos every single week that I hope are helpful in giving you some tips and strategies and ways to make your podcast journey that much easier. Check out these other podcast videos right here. Like I said, there are tips and strategy videos that will help you make your life easier when it comes to your podcast and hopefully help you start, launch, and market your show. And remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere.